Happy Halloween. Can't really breathe in this thing. Ah, the zips caught my hair. Happy Halloween. This year I've been watching a lot of Halloween cartoon specials, and in order to justify doing so to many concerned relatives and an increasing number of therapists, I thought it would be best if I made a YouTube video about it. So sit back, relax, and enjoy a big old kick in the face with some nostalgia. Halloween episodes of cartoons can be some of the very best episodes, allowing animators to dip their toes into the horror genre, usually with great results. Take, for example, the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episodes, probably the most famous Halloween specials there are. They maintained their quality long after The Simpsons itself was becoming a slowly rotting corpse. Take Night of the Dolphin, one of the most famous Treehouse of Horror segments, even being a level in The Simpsons game. Now, try to guess what season that episode appears in. That was in season 12, 2.5 years after Principal Skinner first killed the show.
I'm an imposter. That man is the real Seymour Skinner.
Send in the Clones and Island of Dr. Hibbert, both from season 14. And to this day, The Simpsons are still producing good Halloween specials. Let's start with one of the more basic and vanilla Halloween specials, The Fairly Odd Parents. Most Halloween specials of kids shows will focus on the main characters trick-or-treating, as it's a concept very relatable to its target audience, which will usually lead to the inciting incident and kick off the plot. Here, Timmy, disgruntled that his costume isn't very good, wishes everyone's costumes were real and scary, and that then causes the kids who are dressed as the world-ending Pumpkinators to try to destroy the world. Not much to say about this one, it's fine, the song is catchy, 5 out of 10. The issue I find with a lot of Halloween specials is often they'll happen too early in the show's run, where the show is still finding its footing, and then that's it, that's the Halloween episode forever. Imagine if The Simpsons stopped doing Halloween specials after Treehouse of Horror 1. I mean, The Simpsons Halloween special, it's so old it wasn't even called Treehouse of Horror yet. Kim Possible, for example, its Halloween special was only the 13th episode of the entire show, and in fact features the first meeting of two of its major villains in Duff Killigan and Dr. Draken. The episode doesn't do enough with the Halloween aesthetic to be great, I feel. In fact, Kim turns down both the opportunity to go trick-or-treating or to a fairground type haunted house thing in order to go to a pretty boring party. The main plot of the episode revolves around Kim getting a high-tech piece of armour stuck to her.
Battle-ready armour on!
Which the main villains all want. The armour becomes more prominent when she becomes stressed, but not the stress of fighting to the death, no. The stress of lying to her family and friends so she can go to said boring party. The episode doesn't do much with the Halloween premise, and I feel this episode didn't even really need to be a Halloween episode at all. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. Now, The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy was already entrenched in Halloween and spooky horror aesthetics. And it had 2 Halloween specials, one to finish off season 2, and one which was the pilot to a spin-off which didn't get greenlit and was bolted onto the show as a kind of semi-series finale. But I'm going to ignore that one today, as I know I'll spend the whole time complaining about how it didn't get greenlit and how Cartoon Network cancelled Grim Adventures and Flapjack and Chowder in order to focus on live action shows to compete with Nickelodeon and So, the episode Billy and Mandy's Jacked Up Halloween is great and surprisingly dark. I forgot how far Billy and Mandy pushed its dark themes, what with it being a kids show and all. The episode begins with Grim explaining the origins of Jack the Headless Horseman, who Grim was trying to kill, but Jack then stole his scythe, only giving it back if Grim granted him immortality. Grim, annoyed by this, then cuts off Jack's head, and Jack has sought vengeance ever since. Jack steals Grim's scythe from Billy in modern day, and uses an army of the dead to take over the world and cut off Grim's head, and blah blah blah. It's really good, and just mean-spirited enough where it's really, really funny. This one gets a 7 out of 10. Another thing though, while on the topic of Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, Maxwell Atoms, the creator of Billy and Mandy, recently pitched an actual series finale to Cartoon Network who again didn't greenlight it, claiming that kids these days don't know who Billy and Mandy are. They also haven't greenlit Galactic Kids Next Door for the same reason. Kids don't know who Rocko, Invader Zim or Hey Arnold are, but Nickelodeon gave them all reboot movies. And while we're at it, Cartoon Network, bring back Infinity Train, yeah? Okay, next up is Edd N Eddy's Boo Ha Ha. Edd N Eddy was always my favourite cartoon when I was growing up. However, whilst Billy and Mandy managed to perfectly balance the dark, mean-spirited humour in its Halloween special, I feel like this one goes too far, which unfortunately was a trait of a lot of the worst episodes of Edd N Eddy. It would just be far too mean-spirited. In this episode, Ed watches too many horror movies to the point that he starts reenacting scenes and attacking people, which actually is the same reason my mum said I wasn't allowed to watch this show when I was 5. Well, screw you, Mum. I'm an adult now, and I can watch all the Edd N Eddy that I want. So the episode does have a very minor plot of Eddie following a map left to him by his brother, leading him to Spookyville, but that's just an anticlimax, and the map leads him back to his own house. In fact, the episode is mainly just scenes of Ed beating up every other character he comes into contact with. Then all of them finally at the end get their revenge by attacking Double D and Eddie, but they leave Ed. It just doesn't make sense. Wasn't a big fan of the episode, but the art style was really, really nice. 4 out of 10. Arnold's Halloween was an episode of Hey Arnold that really surpassed my expectations. It follows a simple adaptation of the true story of the radio production of War of the Worlds by George Orwell, in which the broadcast created mass hysteria among listeners, who believed it was in fact a real news broadcast. This simple premise, however, gives all the different side characters an opportunity to shine. See, Arnold is very much the straight man in the show, and all the other characters who get fleshed out during the series are much more memorable characters than him. With Bob's subplot being a highlight as he gathers a group of people and straight up tries to murder the aliens, who does in fact turn out to be his own daughter. This episode gets an 8 out of 10. Sugar Frosted Frights was the Halloween episode of Rocko's Modern Life. It's only 11 minutes, so doesn't really give time to flesh out all of its ideas. It's more of a quick delivery of jokes. And in fairness, the jokes are good. Philbert the Turtle is scared of Halloween, and so has never gone trick-or-treating. When he is dragged out by Rocko and Heifer, he then has his first taste of sugar, leading him to lose his mind and go on a sugar binge. Like Sugar, the episode is fun, but lacks any real substance. 5 out of 10. Operation Tricky is the Halloween episode of Codename Kids Next Door, and I feel it has a far superior use of the 11-minute episode format, as whilst it's not nearly as funny as Rocko, it has a way more succinct story. The first thing this episode does well is it follows only one of our 5 leads, number 4, who, much like Philbert, number 4 hasn't been trick-or-treating in the past, and is amazed by the concept of getting free candy. His haul of a single piece of butterscotch is then stolen by the pirate Stickybeard, and from there we follow number 4 trying to get his candy back. Whilst the episode of Rocko certainly had funnier jokes, this episode has funnier concepts, like you might not laugh out loud, but you appreciate it more. For example, when number 4 gets onto the pirate ship and takes back his one piece of candy whilst ignoring the mountains of candy around him. I also love how over the top this show goes. Much like Edd N Eddy, the stories are shown through the eyes of kids, meaning imagination highly influences the story, and meaning the story doesn't need to be grounded in reality too much, allowing the animators to come up with far more bizarre plots and fantastical visuals. So this episode gets a 7 out of 10. Spongebob Squarepants is an example of a show that had its Halloween early in its run and was 11 minutes long. Despite both of these things though, it's one of the best Halloween specials there is. Scaredy Pants was the 13th episode of the show as a whole, just like Kim Possible. SpongeBob, being sick of being scared of everyone else, decides to dress as a ghost in order to scare others. But ghosts are round and not square, so Patrick cuts off part of his body to round him off, incidentally making him far scarier in the process than any costume. It's a pretty standard plot, however the twist at the end does excel the episode into being one of the all-time greats. In fact, the ending was thought to be so messed up for kids to watch but execs made them add a line in post-production at the very end of the episode saying,
Don't worry, it grows back.
which is why that line is said over a black screen. I give this episode an 8 out of 10. But that's not it for SpongeBob, as a second Halloween special was made nearly 20 years later in 2017. This one is fully animated in stop motion with some puppetry sprinkled in. The episode doesn't really have much going on in terms of a plot. SpongeBob believes scary means funny, so everyone in Bikini Bottom is now trying to scare him to no avail. This is all really just an excuse to show us a series of creative visuals. In the episode we go through 5 different haunted houses, but it never gets boring. You can watch this with the sound on mute and still enjoy the episode. The visuals really are the star here. It's just sight gag after sight gag after sight gag, with some shots even having a mixture of puppetry and stop motion together. One knock against this episode, however, is after watching a season 1 episode, there's kind of a whiplash in regards to the flanderization of certain characters, with Patrick being a lot more dumb, Sandy being way more sciencey, and Mr. Krabs being only about money. But for visuals alone, this one gets a 9 out of 10. Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends is a show that I feel people don't talk about enough. It's a really solid show, and the Halloween episode is no different. Blue is trying to trick everyone with a snakes in a can prank that he does every year. After doing the trick to Mr. Harriman and killing him from fright, Mr. Harriman then becomes a zombie and infects everyone else in the house. It's a really solid zombie story with good use of lighting and rising tension, and some solid jokes in there too. I give this one a 7 out of 10. Now, onto the Simpsons Halloween special. Not that one, but the actual Halloween episode in season 27. It's really, really good. I know, New Simpsons is evil, but this one's really, really good. The jokes in the episode are great, like Homer trying to calm himself by whistling, and then whistling the Halloween theme, or E.T. saying scrotum. I mean, there's nothing funnier than that. Apart from the jokes though, where the episode shines is in its characters. The episode's plot is about Homer and Marge dealing with very grounded issues and trying their hardest to give their children the best Halloween they can. Jerk-ass Homer of later seasons is gone, and here we have a very sincere story of Homer trying to support Lisa, who earlier in the episode becomes traumatised after going to a haunted house meant for older kids. In the later seasons, the writers do seem to forget that Lisa is only 8 years old. But here it's way more realistic. Like, yeah, she would be scared of this stuff. And here Homer's not trying to get her to conquer her fears, he's just there to support his daughter. Something the Simpsons used to excel at.
Always be yourself. You want to be sad, honey? Be sad. We'll write it out with you. And when you get finished feeling sad, we'll still be there.
However, in supporting Lisa, the decorations get taken down, which then upsets Bart, causing Marge to try to make up for it by taking him trick-or-treating. The episode is really good at conveying a genuine Halloween from both the perspectives of a child and of an adult. Also, there's a song and it's really catchy. I give this one an 8 out of 10. Taking a look at the Gravity Falls episode Summerween now, again, here's Disney doing another plot where a character tries to get out of going trick-or-treating to go to a party with someone they have a crush on. Whilst the Kim Possible episode might do a better job of linking the inner conflict of the character with the plot by having a device that physically manifests her lies, I do feel that that comes across a little too heavy-handed, whereas here the conflict is far more grounded. Characters talk and argue and then fix their mistakes. So in the episode, Dipper wants to go to a party with Wendy instead of trick-or-treating with Mabel, which he does every year. But he is then forced to go trick-or-treating anyway after a creature called the Trickster forces them to collect 500 pieces of candy for him before the last Jack-O-Melon goes out. Also, this episode is set during summer, so they have had to contrive a new holiday called Summerween. A lot like that episode of Edd N Eddy where they had Christmas in summer, before eventually then doing an actual Christmas special anyway. The villain in this episode is the Trickster, and it is legitimately scary, and the twist at the end regarding him is good and was well foreshadowed earlier. All in all, I do feel this episode does a better job of showing the inner conflict of growing up and feeling too old to do things you used to like. I give this episode a 7 out of 10. Let's go back now to one of the first cartoon Halloween specials ever produced, that being 1966's It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown. In this special, Linus spends the night waiting for the Great Pumpkin, a kind of Halloween substitute for Santa, in a plot very reminiscent of the Samuel Beckett play Waiting for Godot. This plot, however, has no satisfactory ending that you'd maybe expect from other specials where, I don't know, because Linus believes in the Great Pumpkin, he then sees him at the climax. Nope, that's not how the Peanuts do it. Here, he just wastes his Halloween hoping. Something the old Peanuts specials excelled at is establishing atmosphere and mood. However, that mood was usually melancholy and depression. A unique outlook for a kids' show, certainly. The rest of the special is far less reliant on a plot, being little more than a series of vignettes lacking much, if any, conflict. I'm really confused as to who this special was actually aimed at, because there are long drawn out scenes about notarizing documents and World War I, but hey, maybe that's what audience from 55 years ago were into. It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown is absolutely a product of its time that, when not viewed through the haze of rose-coloured nostalgia, leaves not a lot for new audiences to enjoy. This one I give a 4 out of 10. So finally, let's move on to what I believe is the definitive Halloween special. This one is cheating a tiny bit because it's actually a mini-series consisting of 10 11-minute episodes. That being Over the Garden Wall. First off, the art and music is amazing. It takes inspiration from a lot of different genres of animation, with my personal favourite being the 1930s Betty Boop style. The songs are mind-numbingly catchy, and the story is one of the darkest that I've seen in any animated show. So, the plot consists of two boys wandering through a place called the Unknown, trying to get home whilst avoiding a creature called the Beast. And that's it, that's the whole premise right there. This is accompanied with the amazing voice acting talent of people like Elijah Wood, Christopher Lloyd, Tim Curry, John Cleese, and to say any more would absolutely spoil it for you. So I recommend turning the video off right now, going and finding it and watching the whole thing, and then coming back. Okay, that's the only warning I'm going to give because I am going to fully spoil it now. Okay, so the first 8 episodes, it's a pretty standard concept with the main two characters, Wirt and Greg, wandering through the woods, getting into adventures. The first few episodes of the show are quite tame in order to allow you to familiarise yourself with the world, and these episodes can in fact be a bit slow at points as well. I'm looking at you, Schooltown Follies, which is an episode that I just don't get. I don't think it's a great episode. I know people love it, but I just don't get it. Along their adventures, the two meet a bluebird called Beatrice, who then leads them to Adelaide of the pasture, who can get them home. When we hit episode 7, however, we find out that Beatrice was actually going to give the boys to Adelaide to be her slaves in exchange for Beatrice becoming human again. With this betrayal, Wirt and Greg now have to brave the woods alone. Here, the unknown begins to change from its beautiful autumn aesthetic to a far more wintry and sinister one. Here, Wirt begins to give up hope that he'll ever actually be able to get the boys home, and he starts getting taken by the forest and turned into a tree. A subtle metaphor for death. Oh wait, actually maybe not so subtle, as in the following episode we see the real world where it is indeed Halloween, explaining a lot of context to the characters and their outfits, with their outfits simply being Halloween costumes. Here, Wirt and Greg fall into a river and fucking drown. So yeah, this is literally purgatory and they're literally dying. The Beast is a really effective villain, often only being spoken about or showing up very sparingly until the final episode. And even then we can only properly see him for like 2 frames of animation, and holy hell is that enough. There's also this woodsman character who's been cutting down the trees in the forest to get oil to keep a lantern lit, as the Beast told him that his daughter's soul is inside. And that's one of the few things I have a problem with. How did she come back in the end? If it was actually the Beast's soul in the lamp and not his daughter, and his daughter is dead, then how did she come back? Can like the trees become souls again now the Beast is gone? I don't know. There's also the implication that the forest is in fact filled with trees made from dead kids, and that is, just a lot, Anyways, I've rambled on about this show enough. If you haven't watched it already, please go watch it. It is amazing, possibly the best piece of animation ever. I give this one a 10 out of 10. Thank you so much for getting to the end of this video. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, and while you're down there, may I recommend the subscribe button. If there are any cartoons that I missed out, please leave me a comment, and thank you very much for watching. Have a great Halloween. Nailed it first time. That'll do.